My name's Aaron Rasmussen. I am just recently turned 34 years old. And my life has been quite interesting, you can say. And the tug of the Lord has definitely been upon my life. Ever since probably in my earliest ages, when I was about 4 or 5 years old, I had started thinking about death. And I questioned why we were here if we were just to die. What was the point of my existence? And I was fearful and I was afraid. And I remember going to my mom and asking her, what happens when we die? Why am I here? I don't understand, And she couldn't give me an answer. She just told me that I was too young to be thinking about this. Go to bed, And so I went to my bed, but I cried myself to sleep in fear, wondering what was to come, It was actually literally maybe about 2 weeks had passed, and the story I told you guys earlier, you weren't here, but I had met this man when I was skateboarding with a few of my friends at a church, and God met me there, and that came back to me later on in my life, and I accepted Christ on my skateboard, right? And I remember, actually, sorry, rewind. There's a fast forward a little bit from 4 to 5 because I was about 7 when I accepted God, right? But those things had come. So, anyways, those thoughts were still carrying through me. But I met God, I accepted Him, and I believed, like I had that childlike faith. And I can honestly sit up here and tell you that was what happened. And I went across the street. I knew if I was to get hit by a car that I was going to go to heaven. And I believed that. Fast forward a lot of years, the culture is different, beliefs and everything. I wanted to know, I wanted to know the truth. I compared, I looked at all the history, and I seen that everything gathered with a flood, and there's a similarity in stories. And I also knew in my mind that who am I to deny the existence of God? I am nothing, right? And compared to the Lord, right? And I know nothing, and I also understood then that the Lord was telling me that I didn't need to understand everything right then, and that when time would come, I would understand more as I matured. And for some reason, I was okay with that. I was okay with not knowing, My life had gotten pretty hectic, I'm not going to lie. I wish I could stay up here and tell you that my life was wonderful after that, but it was probably beginning the more pull of the enemy on my life than ever before. And different, cultures and religions, and I started, even there was a moment in my life where I started becoming like a Buddhist monk in a sense, but I didn't deny God's existence, but I liked their culture and how they're kind of, very, just cultural and just pure and just, meditating, and I knew Jesus meditated, and I knew that was a key thing in here, and I never really understood why the church didn't talk about it, and maybe because they didn't understand it fully, I don't know. So, fast forward some more years. Oh yeah, by the way, I sweat a lot, so I'm gonna try to do my best not. But my life had taken a toll. My mom had gotten a divorce with her ex-husband. I never met my father until I was probably about 8 years old, and he just came for a brief second in my life and then was back gone again. He was involved around biker gangs and whatnot, and he had finally kind of steered away for a little bit, but he was still always kind of around it. And I just, grew up without a father. My mom, believe it or not, is Mexican and Indian. And I, looked nothing like her, and everybody thought I was adopted. But anyways, my friends became like my family, pretty much. And I hung around out in the streets a lot. And my mom also had a boyfriend that, was just not very pleasant to be around. And so I hung around them a lot, and unfortunately, they got me in trouble. I got myself in trouble by hanging around them, and I was trying to be cool and doing things. So by the time I was 18, I had already done Grand Theft Auto, residential burglaries, living in sexual immorality, just everything. I've been to juvenile hall. I basically was about to go to prison because I had, on 7/7/07, I had an accident, and I almost killed a kid because I turned too fast, and she hit me side T-bone, but it was my action that caused the reaction, right? If I would have just, not been a hot rod and around, I could have, prevented something, right? Well, anyways, so that hit me pretty hard, I didn't know if the kid lived or not, and I lived in fear about that for a long time. And I was afraid, and luckily somehow a full circle came around, and I found out through the town, hey, nothing came of the child, and I was just so relieved. But I remember crying at night, did I kill that kid? What happened? It was such a sharp pain I felt of conviction, and I didn't know, and let alone right after that, I had already been experimenting in drugs and stuff, and I knew that I had a problem, but I didn't know how to stop the problem. I thought, I'm just young and partying, enjoying life, and I'm just a little more of a rebel than others, And so after all that had kind of gone down, I started seeking God, but I didn't seek Him fully. I never been to church until probably in my 20s. But throughout my years, I developed a relationship with Him, I believe, and I believe He grew me the way He wanted to. And so I guess it's the only way I was able to learn, right? I am pretty stubborn, and I'm definitely self-seeking and selfish, and I'm a full-blown sinner, straight up. And the Lord just kept His hand on me. He protected me, and there's moments I shouldn't even be standing here. I've been hit in car accidents on my motorcycles, overdoses. I've even tried to take my life when my mom had passed, and when my mom passed, it was I lost it was the mama bear and the cub, I was just alone, and that's when my addiction full blown went down, and I was 22 years old when that happened. And so you can imagine from there already being, the way I was, running around with bikers, trying to prove myself and make a name for myself. I'm not going to get into details, but I'm sure we all have a pretty good painted picture, right? And so throughout all that time, though, God was still always tugging on my heart. I always had conviction of things, and I would just kind of just stuff it down a little bit. And I'm not going to lie, I used meth to harden my heart a lot, so I could do things that I wasn't capable to do sober. And yeah, so the Lord, I don't know, He has a plan, right? He has a plan, but I had to be willing, and I had to knock my head. I had to go down. I had to fall. I had to do all this stuff, and then pick myself back up, and then try again, and then go back down and try again. And that was my pattern for almost 10 years. Okay, but I never wanted to give up, But then there was moments too, like in this last turnaround before I didn't fully engage with the Dream Center this time. Because I did come to the Dream Center years ago just to beat a court case. It was strictly I'm doing a program, I'm not going to jail, and that's when God really grabbed a hold of me at the Dream Center. I remember coming there, and I remember feeling so welcome and loved, and for the first time in my life, I didn't have to look over my shoulder. I didn't have to put this facade of this tough guy. I didn't have to be something that I really wasn't, And I was finally able to be myself for once. And then I wish I could say that was great from then on, but it went back to my stubborn ways eventually. But that seed was planted, right? That seed was planted, and I knew there was a place that if I fully tried, it would be possible, right? And for a person like myself, I have to be locked down. I need to be structured. I need to have the Lord every moment, and that's what, that's kind of what happened. Even though I left and stuff, I did seek help other places. And along the way, there's crazy journeys that, side stories that, God was with me, and I was leading people in prayer, and, out in homeless camps, and just kind of being a service for people. And even though I didn't really have much, but I had a home, so for some reason I still felt kind of above them, but I was just like them. I was no different, like I can go home, and unfortunately they didn't have a home. So sometimes I wouldn't even go home. I just would kick it with them and hang out, and we were all doing drugs, I'm not gonna lie. But for some reason I felt like I was kind of being a service to these people, right? And then eventually those people kind of, took too much advantage of me, and I had to kind of cut ties in some ways. But when I finally had decided that enough was enough, right? It was, roughly about 3 years ago, and I became a deserter with my club, okay? And that's not really taken lightly, but if there is like a gray area, and the gray area is if you're truly changing your life and you're truly doing something, then, people are gonna back away from you and see what you do. And if you're really doing what you're doing, you're gonna be fine, And so I just knew, like, that's what I wanted, but I didn't know for sure. But I had some people circling up around me, and I was fearful, but I wasn't fearful of them. I was fearful of dying and I've never lived, right? I was fearful of dying and I've never tried. I can look at my life and I can say honestly and honest to God that all those attempts before were not true attempts. They were just attempts to get out of a situation. They were attempts to please somebody else. They were attempts for this, attempts for that, but it was never a true attempt to change, right? And so that was probably the first time in a long time that I had really been honest with myself, right? And I cried out to God, and I said, God, just let me try just one time, right? Because I knew what was around the corner for me. And I made it down here, surprisingly. God's hand was over me. I did get hit on my motorcycle. I did a backflip off my bike. I had a big old lump on my side of my ankle and everything, my leg, but I didn't break anything, It was kind of a clean hit, and I bounced right off, and, I was pretty stimulated by methamphetamine, but, in that moment, but that might have helped. But after that, the next day was the day of the new road for me. And I made it down here, just by the connections I guess God had laid out for me to make it down here. And here I am standing here in front of you today, right? It's always been a dream for me to preach or to share my story and to help others, and most of all to help people that I grew up with, and to help them see, and experience God like I have. And it's been such a tough battle because a lot of those friends don't want to know me, because I left. And they don't understand fully, what I went through and everything. But it's not their fault, right? It's not. So now that I've came to the Dream Center, I had to do some studying, and I had to really dial myself in. And then in the first year program, I can say a good first half of it, I was really dialing myself in really good. And then as I became a leader in the program, I had, that some stuff kind of was put aside on my own growth, but I was also learning to serve others, which was growing me in a different way, right? And because of that, I ran a pretty good program, and I did really well, but I'm not gonna sit up here and tell you that I was perfect this whole time, because this last year when I became a floor monitor and I was able to have more freedoms and everything, my temptations, they grew, and the devil was really much, flashing me in my eyes, and there was moments where like I was looking at other women when I was in a relationship, and just everything, and my life was just like kind of going backwards, and I didn't want to like fail for sure, right? I went through so much, like, come on, man, and that's when I made the decision, like, all right, I'm really going to try to commit and do this thing. And so a few months back, I decided to follow God fully and come in here, and I knew that was what I was needing in my life. And I tried working. I had a great job at the end here, and then throughout the year, I started really working, because when you go through the program, you're thinking about how am I going to support myself, when I get out of here? Where am I going to live? How's this really going to work? Because I left everything that I have. And here I am, you know, in LA, the most expensive, craziest place ever. And I'm just like working on 2 minimum wage jobs, or, you know, slightly over minimum wage or whatever. And it was just really kind of, you know, like, how am I really going to do this? But it wasn't fulfilling me. It wasn't making me happy. It was actually killing me more inside. And I was drawing away from God. And I knew that. And I saw that. And I had to take action. And standing here today, like, today has been a pretty eventful day today, you know, like in this week even, like I became officially hired with the Supreme Center. And, you know, I'm starting this new season with you guys, and I couldn't be more grateful, man. And I know, like, people don't know who I really am inside, and I hope this year, and this next year, and the next year to come, that I'm able to show what God sees in me, so I can be a light in other people's lives. You know? Amen. That's all I got for you.